All right, we got the playoff 12-team playoffs. So we got some pretty good movement here, mostly because we got some losses that happened. Right, Tennessee lost, so they're first team out down here. BYU making it. BYU lost. That's one that, and I was really looking forward to seeing this. BYU lost, so they would get the automatic bid for the fifth conference championship spot. Which, if you're not ranked above 12, you at least get to 12. So the five conference champion winners automatically get bids. The four highest seeded get the buys. So BYU, since they just lost, are now really kind of on the outside. Really kind of on that outside. Anyways, so Boise State, who is ranked at 12, now is on a first round bye kind of case right now. Which, dude, how crazy would that be to Boise State getting a first round bye? Goodness. Oregon still the number one spot. No changes there. But Boise State in number 4. They're ranked 12. Miami would get the 3 spot, even though they're ranked 8. Because that lost 2 weeks ago. Texas, and I get it, man. My Longhorns. Dude, I would really like for them to take into account, preseason AP top 25 and then AP top 25 of when you played a team. Because that should matter. Like if you play a team, they're full strength and they have some injuries after the case, they wind up dropping off. Or in Michigan's case, it's like, okay, we need to figure some crap out. Like Michigan's played 3 different quarterbacks, and not because of injury reasons. So it's like Michigan's trying to figure out what's going on there. But Texas, they did play ranked teams earlier in the year. Those ranked teams just wind up dropping off. It's not their fault. Anyways, Texas, they only have 1 loss. That's to Georgia at home, even though it was a stinker. Question how healthy Quinn Ewers was in that game. And then, so we got BYU taking up that 5th slot for automatic bids for conference champions. It's just that they're ranked now below the top 11 slots, so they're just guaranteed into that 12. They're currently ranked at 14. Ohio State would be playing them. They would be getting the 5th slot because they're ranked number 2. Alabama, and I'll go into this in just a second about some of this reworking because there's some reordering here. I'm just not a fan of some of this. But Alabama, Notre Dame, that would be a pretty cool matchup to see first round. Georgia, Penn State, that would be a pretty good one to see. Ole Miss going to Indiana. That'd be a neat one. I think seeing Indiana in there, Bloomington. I get it. Part of why the whole expansion into 12 teams was to get more opportunities, but I don't want it to be more opportunities of just blue blood, what we call blue blood programs. I want to see other teams that don't traditionally have that shot, that are always right there, that were always usually right there around 5, 6 to 10 or something like that. That would never get it there because they weren't Alabama, they weren't Texas, they weren't Ohio State, they weren't Michigan. So I would like to see Indiana in there. I really would. I think that would be really freaking cool. I think their only case for Indiana, man, their only case. They have to win this weekend when they play Ohio State. They have to win. That's their only case. And then just looking at this, how cool would this be if Ole Miss actually beat Indiana in that game and then played Texas, right? That's the whole, and I get it, Arch Manning wouldn't be the quarterback for Texas, but I would imagine there would be a pretty good Manning presence there for that game, with Arch E back in the day playing for Ole Miss, and then obviously Eli. Obviously, he also played his college ball there at Ole Miss. All right, let's go through the college football top 25 rankings, and then we'll take a look at the playoff brackets. So Oregon stays where it is. They almost went down to Wisconsin, dude. That Wisconsin scare. That's the thing I worry about with Oregon. Man, I just don't know how much real battle tested they are. They beat Ohio State in Oregon or at Oregon. So, man, but they squeaked it out, and like their defense saved them. By the way, that pick to end the game where the defender deflected the Wisconsin's quarterback's throw, and then the other defender, who's DJ Ungulale's brother, made a pretty good adjustment from the D line and picked that off to seal the game. That was actually a pretty cool play. But yeah, Oregon, man, I've had my reservations about them, but they ain't gonna play anybody until really tough, really challenging until you get to the Big Ten championship game. So there you go. Ohio State rolled. Texas played Arkansas. They won. It wasn't impressive, but that game went about as well as I thought it was going to. That game went about the way I thought it was going to. I figured Arkansas's defense was going to probably keep them in it and wouldn't really let Texas just run away with it. And then, but I just didn't see how Arkansas's offense was going to get it going, right? I just didn't see how they were going to keep up and just get these points that they were really going to need. So, anyways, Texas got that win. Penn State snuck by Purdue by a very wide margin. Don't really even talk about that one. Purdue's just not good, so it's really hard to even talk about any teams that beat them. Indiana was on bye, and then they have Notre Dame at 6, and that is very interesting. I mean, stupidly interesting. I don't even understand that one. It's so interesting. How is Notre Dame, who maybe their best win? I mean, their best win is against A&M at A&M. I get that. That is their number one. But I mean, they have a horrible loss against NIU at Notre Dame, and I just don't understand how you justify Notre Dame being above Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee. Like, what? What are we doing, man? How the hell could you possibly put Notre Dame up there? They ain't played nobody since A&M, and they lost to a team they shouldn't have lost to at NIU. Now they're going to have Army coming up, and that's the other thing is we're going to find out about Indiana, obviously, this next week because they're going to be playing Ohio State. So, but Notre Dame ahead of Alabama, no. No. Now, I get it. Alabama has 2 losses. Notre Dame has 1, but Vanderbilt or NIU, I'm not going to... I mean, that's a really kind of a tough one. I mean, Vanderbilt's had a really good year. But the other thing is Bama has wins against a lot of other top teams, not just A&M. Like, they've beat Georgia. They lost to Tennessee. Okay, I give you that. At Tennessee, I do remember that game. But they beat Missouri, who is falling rapidly. And then they've beaten LSU, who, I mean, LSU kind of went on a we're not playing anybody run, so they got the benefits of getting a rank because of not playing anybody. So I don't know, man. Like the loss to Tennessee is a much higher quality loss, and I could say Vanderbilt and NIU kind of even out. So it's like I don't. If you put those 2 teams on the field, I'll take Alabama 100 out of 101 times. So, anyways, Notre Dame they got their win this week. Then we got, obviously Alabama. They got a pretty big win there against Mercer. Miami and Ole Miss were off. I actually would just move Miami past Georgia, past Ole Miss, past Georgia. That's just kind of where I'm at on that. And then it's also really weird because I would actually have Alabama behind Ole Miss and Georgia. I would move Ole Miss and Georgia ahead of these 3, ahead of Notre Dame, Alabama, and Miami. That's just kind of what I would do. Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's really tough, especially in that SEC, man, because they've all kind of knocked each other off in some kind of way. But my goodness. Anyways, Georgia gets the big win against Tennessee, really kind of helping their case with that one because that was a big knockout game possibly for them. Now they get 2 easy games to kind of end out their season. So Georgia was very impressive. They really controlled that game, much like they did against Texas. Really was a defensive game for them. It wasn't a lot of trying to pass the ball, which is what they need to stay away from because Carson Beck has proven like I don't know what's his deal. He is worse than what I thought he was going to be than coming into this year. But Tennessee, oh yeah, I mean getting that L. I honestly, this is a tough one because I mean where do you stick them? I mean Tennessee's good. I guess you stick them there. I mean I don't know. I mean Boise State. I get it. It's going to be tough for Boise State to make their case because they're not going to play anybody. The only team that they played all year in the rankings is going to be Oregon. They've lost to them by 3 points, which is a really good quality loss because, I mean, they're the number one team in the country, and you lost them by 3 at Oregon. So, dude, need a little bit more respect here for Boise State. By the way, I really like watching Ashton Gentry, man. Every week I'll say it, dude. Just really enjoy watching that dude play. That dude is freaking good. SMU, quality team. Seen them play a few times. They're a quality team. I'd be curious to see if they actually do win that ACC. Man, that's gonna be. I'll be real interested to see if that happens. BYU goes down. Wow, this was a big one, man. Kansas kind of got them pretty much the whole game, but my goodness, BYU just, yeah, I mean they just didn't have it that game, I guess. I mean, and to be pretty honest, coming off of last week's with Utah and how that game kind of went and ended, but. Yeah, the BYU Kansas game was very impressive from a Kansas perspective. Like they were putting it on BYU. I watched a little bit of that. I was like, dang, BYU ain't doing nothing. Texas A&M was on a kind of a bye. They played New Mexico State. It's kind of a bye, right? Yeah, I mean, they're gonna play Auburn this next week, which is like Vandy of the SEC this year. So there you go. Texas A&M probably going to win that one. Then they will be playing my Longhorns Thanksgiving week that Friday. That's that'll be the big one to determine probably who's going to the SEC championship game. I believe because both of these teams actually have a shot to go. If A&M wins out, they'll go to the SEC championship game. If Texas wins out, they'll go to the SEC championship game. So that game between the Lone Star Showdown back on for the first time since 2012 or 2013, whatever, is going to determine the SEC rankings, the SEC championship matchup. Yeah, that game will be like a semifinal for the SEC right there. Assuming neither one of them slips up this next week, because Texas will be playing Kentucky, A&M will be playing Auburn. Colorado, my goodness, man. I'm crossing my fingers. I am hopeful, baby. I am hopeful to see the Buffaloes win the Big 12. Probably still be playing BYU. I don't think there's really another team that's even close. So BYU will be playing Arizona State this next week. And if Arizona State wins that game against BYU, they will hold the tiebreaker. And assuming they don't lose the following week, the last week, Arizona State would actually go to the Big 12 championship game. So that would be interesting. But Colorado only has one conference loss. And that could be a really interesting kind of matchup. Because Colorado is going to play Kansas and Oklahoma State to end out their schedule in the Big 12. So Colorado is basically going to the Big 12 championship game. BYU, though, you got to get past Arizona State, right? Down here, Arizona State. Yeah, that's going to be a big one this weekend. I might poke in on that one because that's going to determine who plays in that Big 12 championship game. And I'm hopeful to see Colorado, dude. Colorado is starting to get real dangerous. A little too much confidence. Probably liking for a lot of people out there, man. See them in the college football playoff, and they would have a first round bye if they won that Big 12 championship. Ooh, buddy. Dion primetime in the playoffs. Yes, sir. Clemson. You know, they're not a bad team, but whatever. But they're okay. They've beaten all the teams they should have. They got by Pittsburgh this past weekend. There's not much else to say. They're not a high end team. They're not going to compete for the championship, for the playoffs, unless they win the ACC, which I don't think they will. If they got to the ACC championship game, I mean anything can happen, but I don't think they will. South Carolina. Talk about another team that has steadily improved, much like Colorado throughout the year, has gotten better, looking much more impressive every week. South Carolina. That's another team that I think a lot of other programs don't want to be playing right now. Army. Still, man, they just rolling. They just doing what they do. The thing I'm most impressed with about Army is their defense. Like their defense is solid. It's solid. So they'll be playing Notre Dame this weekend in New York at Yankee Stadium. So I'm going to be really watching that game because if Army pulls off one of the greatest seasons in academy history, like military academy history, like that would be crazy. I think there would be a lot of petitioning to make sure somehow, some way, Army would get into the 12-team playoff. I think that would be amazing. Tulane, yeah, I mean, you don't play much of anybody really. So Tulane did beat Navy this past weekend. Actually, shut them out. And they only have one game left. They only play Memphis. That's it. So Tulane, they don't play much of anybody. So if you're just a little bit better than all the other teams, then yeah, you're going to be winning some games. Arizona State, though, kind of talked about them a little bit. Arizona State, I believe, was off this past weekend. Iowa State back in the rankings, I believe, after losing 2 in a row. So there you go. Iowa State did drop 2 in a row. Kind of a bummer. Missouri, I honestly can't believe they're still ranked. But hey, they are. They're just not a good team. I'm going to stand by that. Whatever. UNLV, I have not seen them play. Illinois, making some headway earlier in the year, but has lost some games. Some of the other teams that kind of dropped out was Washington State went down to New Mexico. Kind of not happy that they lost, but it's not oh man, should they be in the Big 12 or 12-team playoff? And it's like, no. So yeah, they went down to New Mexico. So there you go. Pretty good rundown. There's some reordering here, and probably like this second 5 here that I think should be done. I really don't have an issue with some of these up here. Indiana, Penn State, because some of these are going to get worked out. A lot of these teams right here, Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, they've all played each other, right? In Georgia, they've lost 2 games. Who have they lost to, right? Who have they lost to? They lost to Alabama. They lost to Ole Miss. Both teams ranked in the top 10. Who's Ole Miss lost to? Ole Miss lost to Kentucky and LSU. 2 teams not even ranked in the top 25. I get it. You got the head-to-head win over Georgia, and it was a pretty dominant win. It wasn't even by like 3 or a point. I get that. They kind of put it on Georgia. They controlled that game. But it's like, I mean, if we're talking about head-to-head kind of comparisons on some point, on some metrics, one of these teams has losses outside of the top 25. Both of them. Like Georgia has both their losses are inside the top 10. And then Bama, Bama's losses are, Vanderbilt, obviously everybody knows that one, and Tennessee. So, man, this is a tough one, but it's a tough one. The 2 teams that Georgia lost to are ranked ahead of them, but those 2 teams have much worse losses. Much worse. So, I don't know, man. I don't know. I would almost say Georgia, you leapfrog Georgia, put them at 6, or maybe put them at 5. I would drop Penn State. I'm not a big Penn State person. I would move Indiana up. Put Penn State, drop Penn State back, put Georgia 5, Indiana 4, Penn State maybe 6, and then have Alabama, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Miami, something like that. But yeah, I don't see why Georgia's 10, dude. Not with that stretch of on the schedule that they had. That stretch was brutal.